Julie here with Sirius Phallus Moon, and this is Soul Hour Saturn Day. Moon is applying to conjoin Rahu, ruled by Jupiter, just trining Mars, and ruling the Ascendant, and midheaven is 0 degree Libra, ruled by 22 in Venus in Libra, applying to oppose Chiron. So we have a couple of interesting junctures of the kind of annual Venus opposing Chiron in Aries, which is kind of like fairness to cisgender women versus cloning project and LGBTQ, or LGBTQ rights versus the fact that many people had their sexual orientation altered by torture and ritual, and fairness would actually mean different things to them. This is an annual opposition between Spica and Chiron and Aries on Andromeda. Okay, Spica in Libra. And we have been seeing that in the last couple of years. Mars applying to oppose Uranus and Sedna, which is probably why the episodes of the Gladio operation are coming back to the forefront. I think I didn't upload this episode yet. No, I did not. So, in this episode, I'm going to take a look at the Neptune-Pluto synodic cycle. And right off the bat, as far as Uranus and even the discovery of Uranus kind of coincide with the opium dealers' revolution, better known as the American Foundation. And Uranus is exactly about going from something that is illegal to something legal, or something that was legal becoming illegal. And that is because Uranus just liberate us from what is no longer serving. But this one is yes, so this is end of Gladio era. I did not find a good picture for that so far. The M&Ms. I did notice Pluto and Neptune have association with the gold, going on and off the gold standard or silver standard. I have my golden ages for that, but it's not exactly golden ages. I mean, so let's all study. First of all, where was the conjunction? And the conjunction of Pluto-Neptune was in the 1880s, 1892, 1891. Going back to that year, we have basically a couple of things occurring. And basically we have the Union Labor of Carnegie going on a strike, the Homestead strike. The Pelcy versus Ferguson wanted to legalize racial segregation, which led to the Jim Crow laws. Later, we will have the explosion in Maine, okay, in the kind of like the USS Altalena. Basically, a ship was drowned on purpose and caused the 260 American. That would be the Navy. So, yeah, you know, but we all know that that's also the Navy, and they drowned. Be caution with Uranus, with Saturn, Neptune at the end of Pisces, because we can have something like that NATO can have a mishap around that. This would be their seventh house. Okay, so I think we opened Saturn in Pisces. I don't know, because I was following NATO only like for years. So okay, but there's just going to be something around, and it can go all the way to the ingress. So that's something that can happen with the Saturn Neptune as well, because Saturn is ruling over Pluto and is kind of bringing the energy of Pluto Neptune conjunction before the actual conjunction. Okay, that's okay. Saturn ruling over Pluto kind of brings the energy of Pluto to Neptune, because Saturn is going to conjunct Neptune. So it's going to have both the Pluto sextile Neptune energies and Pluto conjuncting Neptune energies. And such a thing with that ship can actually happen. It's giving Altalena. It was the same story, but with an Israeli ship, and there was the fight amongst the guerrilla organizations that would later become the IDF. Etzel, Lehi, and Haganah. So yeah. Then there was the U.S.-Spain. I just accidentally said that it was a false. Yeah, everybody knows that it was a false flag. I mean, and that left the United States fighting Spain, because the Dutchies just stole silver from Spain, but they couldn't do Vogue, so they did that, and then took over Spain, and the Philippines were also going under U.S. ruling. We now see such trajectories with Sudan, with Congo, okay, kind of like infusing a civil war and looting the rare earth minerals. That comes to a lot of, have you noticed that in the last couple of decades, people don't treat their teeth anymore, they coat them. Okay, they don't treat their teeth anymore, they coat the teeth. And one would say that before the World War, they would put gold instead of teeth, which ended up quite malefically. Saturn and Sun are not friends. They're the same sect, but by the way, a nation that made its money, that laundered its money into a booming industry of fake teeth is Liechtenstein. And we see how those trajectories affect, with all the struggles of the Inuit, they eat belugas and have fairly good teeth relative to the progressed West, and that is quite interesting. There were, by the way, certain tribes where the men would dance and flaunt their teeth to show that they are a good partner. And I don't think the Gladios could do that. My insistence on not coating my teeth I don't know how it will turn out, but probably it will be notable in history. Okay, and then there was the cross of gold. Okay, we want to sacrifice the United States on a cross of gold. We're talking about the Gilded Age, and okay, some financial historians from YouTube that talk about that. Basically, that was the time where the gold standard was confiscating the gold from people, and it opened a lot of opportunities for the Gilded Age, but it opened major wealth gap, and William Ginger's Bryan was basically resisting the golden standard. Again, I'm not expert on what would be the hidden motives behind that, because we cannot separate the gold, even at that area, from oil and from trees and coals. It would be the opening note to what would bloom to be the Gladio operation era. Okay, if we talk about the Bolshevism, and we talk about the First World War, and we talk about the role of, and everybody loves to say Rockefeller, but it ain't like the other oil companies don't do the same. So, eso, eso es, and but this is Nobel energy, or Ig Nobel energy. Should have seen the face of that Mariv. That Mariv owner in 2010 it was. That was Emir Kusturica movie. And this was a major economic crisis that lasted for most of the decade. Thomas Alva Edison invented the kinetoscope. And U.S. flag in Cuba, which would carry a certain trajectory in the Cuba Missile Crisis later. So this was the beginning of filmmaking, the modern technology that will allow us to unite in 2 degrees here. 2 degrees here. This is an exciting moment for me. You know, in filmmaking, I did not go into myth, and then I became an astrologer, and I had to understand the myth to understand the astrology and the relation to the myth. And basically what I'm doing now is using mythology predictively. If I talk about Sedna's story, and that it all became with quite a resistance to study myth for no particular reason in filmmaking, and how the mythical language and the cinematic language coincided. Goes all the way back to the arts, okay? When we make art inspired by myth, to celebrate myth, and we talk about historical movies when we want to warn from something that is about to be. And this is a cinematic language. Okay, I remember The Matrix coming out during COVID, and people needing to wear a mask to see The Matrix. So Neptune is a very cinematic, and Neptune and Pluto met next to my present Rahu in Gemini, which is a sign of technology. And this is where we would have a technology that would be used to create films that would later be of high use. If you think about the Russian history of filmmaking, they were the national filmmakers that created the aesthetics, and they were in service of, okay, what would later become the Soviet or the communists, depending which nation you you ask. But the imbue, I did a chart of filmmaker. I think it was still in Jupiter point of Thales, where I did chart of filmmaker and director, and how the film industry is still so imbued in the intelligence. And even there are screenwriters, thinking about Alandra, survivor of the Montauk, okay, of the time, the experiments with time, CERN, okay. There's a cinematic aspect to that. There's a timeline aspect to that. One of the first people I heard talking about timeline shifting, was Gigi Young, that talked about the people having choices between timelines, even when they channel With my slight experiment in channeling, I was exposed to timelines of people, um, you know, being in misery, and it like, yes, it was not that evolved and developed, but definitely people that worship the lower astral develop timelines that are less benefic to them and to others than people that actually have the discerning um, and go out of those forms of ritual abuse. I actually am grateful to the work of Esoterica um, and the work of Gigi Young in discernment regarding the occult and understanding that there is power to tap into, and when we tap into that benefically and not by feeding people to the lower astral or sacrifice, something that the monotheistic religion love to address as pagan but practice in themselves. So I'm avoiding monotheistic terminology because actually there are shamans in Africa that taught me during 7th October that they can use hibiscus tea instead of blood for the deities that people used to sacrifice blood, okay, whether it was pets or actually people or children too. And that was a great inspiration for my occultistic work, that is to antidote the lower astral feeding, something that I worked greatly upon during 7th of October. Um, and it is too early to say what were the results of that, but it definitely exposed certain things that were not of that trajectory to come to the forefront. So yes, one moment. We were in 1980s, and I actually did like the Hebrew version contained a lot of things that I can translate here. Um, so Cuba, okay, we saw Cuba. By the way, I saw something came to me with a vision of a certain car that leaves a parking lot and becomes the gun at the gun placed at the first act, where that car leaves the parking lot and becomes like the gun that serves at the first act, um, is something that I saw. Um, so definitely we are expected certain things to do with cars exploding and so on and so forth. Um, yeah, whatever. I mean, we know that those things, um, yes, happen. Um, And we know if they are successful towards the offenders, then the offenders get assassinated. If they are unsuccessful, then they are unsuccessful. That's just the way things are. Oh, I understand. Okay, I mentioned a certain case. And again, when that thing, when there's no ritual abuse, it's very difficult to create assassination. It's very simple, It's just, will the world be rational or not? I don't know. But those are the timelines about that. Um, so, those things that we see, talking about segregation, false flag, which would serve, which it's safe to say that the main event in Maine, USS, for the SS USS Maine, yes, that were drowned in Cuba. I think it is safe to say that was the opening note for a series of false flags that will be an American economic hitmanship that became then USA. Okay, USA probably did not invent that. Probably Volk did that before that, and probably other countries or empires did that before that. You know, when you have to, when you want to loot over natural resources, then basically you need to have a crusade around that. And this is where, yes, and this is where um, we're going to see those just wars arise. I did chart of Mossad that had the mantra, okay, the emblem, with trickery you will make yourself a war, and that. And I talked about how in the 67, after 67 war, when Israel was winning, which may pertain to the situation today with Palestine, okay, and the need to preserve conflict, okay, the need to preserve conflict, and this is something that's been affecting the ability of let's say if you open a pizza, then with the business models that open a pizza in an equitable model, a pizza worker could buy a house. Okay, that's just a dividends-based model where all the people share the dividends of the company and they just don't make the basis minimum but the dividends. Then, but with the mafiosi model, then people get paid, even with minimum wage, a salary that is not suffice to even rent a house. And this is how we got to where we are today in the housing crisis of United States. Israel is no different. And then people are outthrowing the regime, but they're thinking, they're idealizing the drug trade, which was the foundation of the regime to begin with. So that is, you know, there are hardly anything that can beat political culture. And this is why those torturous projects were done to destroy society so that war can be created. But then those resources are funneled. It's kind of like when a person makes their money by corruption. It goes to medicine, and the medicine doesn't medicine, and that's just, you know, it's antithetical to wealth. But that's kind of like what humanity knows to do. So we had the opening notes of segregation, of the false flag, civil war, creation and capitalization on civil wars. We see that now with the Gen Zers carrying basically the skulls and bones flag. Whether they like it or not, that's basically what funds. Okay, kind of like during the Bolshevik era. Everybody knew that the monarchy needed to be decentralized, but they were schooled by the oil companies and funded by them, and then the overtaking of the oil companies, you know, put people into certain type of habitat where the money went missing, and when people began to question where they're classified, where the money goes to, and then it's the same as today, the classified projects, and then they began to want to funnel the money back, whether it's the veterans that served at the war and now need to be acknowledged and cannot go to work, or it's the people that worked for the motherland, and where are the infrastructure, where are all these things, and so on. Or the people that wanted to make a life while making a living, okay, and to just live, and was like, okay, where's the money? Why don't you go to work? Well, I'm actually trying to rehabilitate and open in a business. I'm trying to see what would be my fiscal business models to have enough liquidity, enough to pay the employees, and so on and so forth. Oh, amazing. So wonderful that you turn to here. If you are going to be informant, we can help you with that. No, actually, I know that that informant bubble is about to pop, and you're asking me to be an informant is asking me to do crime, which basically you would later litigate me for, um, while not providing for the infrastructure to not do crime and trying to even take away the infrastructure to make a life while making a living. No, that is budgeted by classified projects budget, which is actually both my money, whether it's the money that I've earned and went there through taxes, or the money that was kept away from me by keeping the opportunities and a way to run a business that is actually a good legal business, a way which is basically my own profit and my own prospective profit. If I have to report for purpose of tax, then I would report for a year ahead, and sometimes years ahead, and pay it up front, and then I would have the return dividends if I didn't make that money and more. So when it comes to the money that was funneled to classified projects, is not just the money that I made or didn't make and pay taxes for, it's also the prospective income of rehabilitating myself from a financial crisis and the mental residues that accompany that. Okay? And it's not about even that being a shit ton of money. It's a shit ton of sovereignty that is now not in the power of the people, and we're scheduled to have that bubble pop. That's what happened in the 90s and with the Soviet Union. It's about to bubble pop today, and towards the Neptune square Pluto, it's about to bubble pop completely, because the end of the era, of almost a century-long era, where the organized and the crime partook in both having to govern. Okay, and I talked about the fact that people that had PTSD relied on the Herzl or the drug dealer to get good quality of their own weed. Okay. And then what weed causes? It causes people to have munchies, like okay, and then people need to replenish it. It harms the absorption of minerals. That's what I get about wheat, because otherwise people would not need these excess sweets. Okay, so I think there are probably better plant teachers than cannabis. There are probably better plant teacher than cannabis out there. Okay, I'm not an expert on that, but then they would need actually nourishing food, which would open up the food bubble. And then you have people with PTSD that need to smoke weed and then to eat food, and there's a shit ton of expenses funneled back from the classified projects. And that was okay as long as the drug dealers and the occultists or oil companies worked together, because that would keep the money circulating in the system that is now dividing. And it created a lot of moldy things as well. And again, now, I mean, in the coming decades, there is time to prepare, there is time to acknowledge. And a lot of mafiosi that went from being mafiosi to informants want to go the route and become legal business owners, which means that they would have to provide for their employees, they would have to fight for their civil wars with the labor rights, and okay, they will have to undo completely what any crime mechanism within and around them to sustain. And this is This is very challenging on all levels of being. Neptune also rules shame, so they would have to find a way to cure the shame, and actually repent, or the equivalent of repent in action. And Neptune in Aries is a wonderful time to repent in action, not by doing the double, but by completely correcting the time where they were doing the double. And again, mafiosi probably got mafiosi by being disincluded. Neptune is isolation. Okay, so it's not about like judgment day for mafia or anything like that. No, it simply means that people would have to turn to a certain trajectory, because they wouldn't be able to be supported by being informants that target civil society, and they will have civil society to confront. Okay, and that is something to consider. More things that we already see there: the discussion about segregation. Let's see where Uranus was at the time. Okay, this is the 1980s. This is before coming to the conjunction. Uranus was with Neptune during the 1980s. Urano-Neptune. We also had the Urano-Neptune after in the 1990s. Now, in the 2000s, I think we had the Urano-Neptune. Here's an entire generation that was born with the Urano-Neptune. I gave maybe 1 or 2 readings to the members of that generation. One of the people that had the Uranus in Aquarius knew about something to do with whistleblowers on the news and media, and something to do with children. But then that person probably was nervous system hacked. They were fighting a fight with apotropsy, and then their nervous system was hacked, and they were trying to gaslight me. So, and they had a high-tech position. They learned high-tech position, but they were still fighting apotropsy. So you think about Urano-Neptune in Aquarius as Neptune being apotropsy and Uranus being developing technology, and how basically the people that resisted cooperating with, like, the Epsteins or something, got undermined from their own incomes, and those were quite some incomes. Okay, there was tech incomes, and how the supposed psychiatric patient is a tech giant. Okay, and yes, kind of makes it difficult. So here we had this Uranus and Neptune in Sag. Pluto, there was a Pluto Rahu. Those times when Pluto Rahus. Pluto was at the end of Pisces. That's the 1820s. That was kind of like the closing square. Then we had the 1890s, and Uranus was in the beginning of Scorpio, not making any particular, making an inconjunct connection to the Pluto-Neptune, ruled by Mars. Mars is fast moving. Uranus is the fastest moving of the outer planets. And I began to question how the Pluto-Neptune cycle, if we talk about the Neptune-Saturn as relating to the commies, how the Pluto-Neptune relates to the United States, and the opium trade and the drug related stuff. So I know that we cannot take the place of Uranus away when it comes to the history of United States. It was around the discovery of Planet George, aka Uranus, rebelling King George. So I absolutely cannot take away the importance of Uranus here. That being said, Pluto Neptune seems to be quite interesting um, to consider. Moving forward, from the 1890s, we would already have Gladio operation, which is beyond a fascinating trajectory and shows us also how, amongst many other things, how black culture got imbued with drug dealing by design that kept us all the way and infused with the fact that those treason cults did also Mengele type experiments in the psychological Mengeles of the classified projects. So we would have reliance on rape and rapey, which would get any society entangled. Um, and then black people trying to liberate themselves while still not being able to negate rape. And I go about thinking how Melcolm X was assassinated when he decided to abandon Nation of Islam, which he had to be a part of in jail to survive in jail. And this 22 catch where it is impossible to not support to not be a part of a rape structure, and yet when they want to out with the person, they just put them in jail. And of course, a sex offender in jail. Just today I read about a teacher that was for several months raping a student in high school, and then he got into jail and was murdered by a person who was already there for murder, because he was about to be released in 2027. And everybody knows that the person wasn't going for rehabilitation. He wasn't going through the 22 catch that put him there. Okay, he would have to go full-blown ritual abuse survivor, but then he would need to have housing, he would need to have, and he would need to have deprogramming for, okay, for the torture that got him to rape, and particularly to rape the innocent, because it's an attack on the light occult imbued with torture that targeted the nervous system. And so, yes, we absolutely don't want rape to continue, and by all means, even if lethality, rapes must be stopped. At that situation, we see how black community, that person was white, but how black community could not tend to the point of interference that would actually liberate black community. Same goes to the Palestinians and the Jews and the Jews and the Jews and the Jews. Okay, if Israel was founded on Epstein, it could by definition never be free. Okay, and so the one point of interference, which is sexual sovereignty in spirit and in matter for all genders, that could first of all show us what is the real and authentic sexual orientation of someone, and gender identification. Okay, in a world where there is hatred to men, then it is, there are even people that grew up having their more emotional intelligence qualities praised, and they grew up to become, okay, more feminine in their gender expression, and And then there were people that, we when it comes to women healing from violence, they're always encouraged to anger, by that embodying their boundary setting, which was basically basically the women that suffer the most from violence were not the women that were not feminine enough or whatnot, or not attractive enough or whatnot. It was the emasculated women. Okay, and then the women went to the other pole where they couldn't express vulnerability, or what the human trafficker Andrew Tate named when a woman is abused, she becomes a man-like. So we see how sexual sovereignty is something that scientifically we cannot know the nature of people without having that C factor removed from the equation, which means we can only have a setting and control setting when all the groups have sexual sovereignty. Otherwise, we really don't know what the nature of humanity is. In fact, we only know the control groups of people that weren't ritually abused and they didn't develop psychopathic, narcissistic, whatnot tendencies. Now, this is all so relevant to Gladio because black people were double binded by this programming of rape. They were also allowed only one trajectory, which was to infuse music or black music, whether it was jazz or later rap culture. And rap culture, in the origin of it, as far as I understood from black people, was rebellious, just like jazz was around freedom. And they were basically forced to become mafia and to drug deal. And that created a stereotype of the woman beating, drug dealing black man. And in that, if we look at artists like Little Kim, that accentuated on the female orgasm and women getting money, that was the antidote and the closest approximation, knowing that even women that were trafficked basically deserve to have their own orgasm and, okay, with fellatio and whatnot. And that was basically a voice that outside of the black community just looked like people promoting sex work or promoting trafficking or promoting drug dealing. And that was by design and by definition, because if an elite white person wanted to become a satanic ritual abuse survivor in the 60s, they probably, most of them would die as well, but there was some sort of some opening towards that. Then imagine a black woman. And that pertains to why in 2025 Black Lives Matter or any type of black liberation, black US citizens, BIPOC US citizens being invaded by ICE and children being shot and mothers, pregnant women, and families separated of US citizens in Oregon, which is kind of like where all the Karens live. It's northern America, okay? It's not Mississippi, goddamn, okay? And it's closer to the Salem trials. Um, so we're talking about the family. If you look at the real estate around Oregon, the prices are insane. So we're talking about the U.S., kind of like the families that made it into American society, okay, got invaded by ICE. I'm not talking, okay, I know there will always be like the neighborhoods within the places and so on and so forth. But hey, we're not talking about Mississippi, goddamn. We're talking about the American citizens one day being invaded into their house, being marked first because they were BIPOC. But that is just the first term, because the second one is definitely going to be absolutely white. And we all know that that was the end game, and that's how they got the BIPOCs, the target individuals, to target individuals, promising them that they're going to do that to white people as well. Okay, the devil usually masquerades itself as righteous, in that regard, and I don't mean the Christian notion of the devil here. Now, other than BIPOC, Gladio was a century of targeting civilians from their own money and opportunities under the guise of classified projects budget. And it was the children of the 60s that are running the show right now, those of them that did not become, Anneke Lucas. By the way, I know Anneke Lucas is having her course right now, so she's not super available. That would be a good time for the people that have the ability to donate to her podcast. Okay, and that would be the people that are usually the passive listeners. So that would be the time to, for the people that can and have the money to do that. That would be a good time to have Anneke Lucas finishing the course with a surprise of having her podcast funded. Okay, and that would be a great contribution to a resource that made it available for many people to become survivors, and to alleviate a lot of the targeting project. Um, okay, and to people that do all these videos, the jamming videos, the jammers of frequency videos, all these people that are doing an amazing job while being targeted themselves, and assisting people to keep the option of not being a genocide or human criminal war criminal, as a viable, as a sole viable living opportunity, still possible. Okay, and this is, yes, this is very, very important. Now we're coming to, again, the 50s, where we would have the sextile, and this would be the opening sextile. So Gladio operation was the opening sextile. I think we had Altalena at that time. And I think Altalena would serve to establish 7th of October, because this would be the origins of the IDF still playing a part. It was basically Israel taking down Israel. Okay, the immigrant ship of Altalena. And this would serve to create the friction in societies and the trauma that would funnel people having the emotional motive and the psychological motive, and probably also the financial one, to think of the day or the possibility where the IDF would split. Now, let's talk about that, because it's about to happen. Okay. I'm not an expert on IDF. I know I made a satire using a certain symbol that I thought had to do with officers, and Okay, for my own, let's just put it that way, I was not compatible with that type of, um, let's just put it that way, okay? Um, there's a lot of weapon leaking away from armies. Um, so this is something that definitely creates a division, even to the point that soldiers were not being paid well, so they were thinking of trading weapon. And again, a person that is all well paid and well nourished and doesn't have to commit any crime, they'll probably keep that. Like they're not likely to be recruited. This is why the classified project budget targets civilians to try to make them recruitable to do crime. Um, so we had the sextile going all the way to almost the 80s. Okay, after the bisextile separating in the late 40s, 50s, we had the bisextile going all the way to the 70s, 1978. Is it the sextile? Yes, that's the Neptune. Okay, still sextiling, and we still have it today. So it's not before 2061 where the square actually perfects, but we already begin to see um, the many things that basically call for um, a refunneling of the classified project budget to actual human rights. And this is the thing: Saturn, Neptune, ruling over Pluto out of bounds. NATO will have to provide for sovereignty, particularly NATO. And it has 15 years to do so before Neptune conjoins Aries with Rahu of NATO in the 8th house. Um, and so everybody, ever since COVID, okay, it was a military operation, not was NATO being scammed, okay, in terms of that would be basically a fiscal scam on NATO. And then when NATO is being accused, it has to defend itself. And what it has to defend itself from and by has to do with the skulls and bones. Okay, so okay, when it comes to the Bilderberg and Belsen chart, it also something that happened in the 50s, and people are going to inquire into that, particularly the young generation that has to target civilians and become criminal, and then being persecuted, okay, for okay, and the persecution is usually so that the person would become a whistleblower and then extorted to commit an even bigger crime. So this is where people understand that, okay, there's a difference between stealing silver from Spain, thereby thereby curating inflation, because when all the silver or gold is in the hand of the bank and not the people, then the bank has too much power over the people. And to steal it from, I don't know if it has to do with the robber bank. Okay, but then when it comes to, the type of stealing or that is funneling the resources to harm people, then when we sway away from the Robin Hood, then there are trajectories and bubble pops. And, probably there are some people that manage to predict and so on, but it has to coincide with the individual chart. So there would always be, oh, that person got away with, and so on. Well, a person can cynically do the right things and then become not cynical about the right things that they did. This is also a trajectory that can happen to people. But those that think about capitalizing and manipulating the system and then, cashing in, they run the risk of going Algor Hiss. Um, or even going Melcolm X. Okay, Melcolm X had to be um, accommodating with Nation of Islam when he was imprisoned. Okay, and here we see also the religious factor playing into that. And the minute he wanted out, he was assassinated. So, and then both Malcolm X and Martin Luther King had to allude to black men raping white women, um, and which basically would mean that to begin with, that was making all of their emancipation struggle futile. Because anything that doesn't have sexual sovereignty doesn't have sovereignty, and a perpetrator doesn't have sexual sovereignty. Okay, the whole point of making people rape is so that they can be mind controlled. They are raped and then they try to force, if they manage to force the person who was raped to rape an innocent person, okay, then basically they got that rapist mind control, and that was the end game. And then the next raped person they would try to control to, okay, to rape another person. And we understand that that is and let's say they moved certain trajectory, so now they will have a Dutro saying, I am a small link in a megalithic chain, and no amount of Michel Nihul can silence the echoes and frequencies that were and are created to this day, um, by the fact that, yeah, they got to rape the other ones, but then the Dutros are singing, and the Mark Alandras are coming out as ritual abuse survivors. That Mark Alandra was supposed to do an Epstein or a Dutro, and um, and and Anneke Lucas was supposed to make it feel comfortable for women to join the party. Okay, that would be her role if she would be within those trajectories, as both the assassination and extortion cultural, but also they would expect her to make it safe for women to feel safe to come as a woman invites them, I don't know, to an event or um, okay, or that would be that type of trajectory as well. Um, yeah, the thing with the Epstein survivors is that some of them had to traffic the young girls while being the trafficked girls. And when people open that can of worms, they're like, well, Epstein himself, or Dutro himself, or Didi himself. Um, and according to testimonies by Alandra. I believe you am. um, then, yeah. So that was the Gladio. Um, how will it be towards the upcoming square? I don't know.